That song. Is the top of the hour. If you're just joining us, 9:03 to be exact. And in the air chair today, we have MP Melissa Gumbs. Good morning.
Good morning, Elektra. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And I just want to say congratulations
Thank
to
you.
you for, of course, being re-elected to Parliament.
Thank you.
And we're going to get right into the meat and the potatoes and the dumplings of everything. Of course, your party, Party for Progress, has made a coalition with the other parties. So let's talk about that
Hmm.
one time off the bat, because I guess everybody would love to know, how that formation process took place.
Yeah. Well, after election, usually you have this tendency to rush and sign
Uh huh.
as soon as possible. But of course, these are conversations that we've been, exploring
Of
over
course.
the duration of campaign. Just to kind of see like where we would fit, where we
Mm-hmm.
would align, and also, who is really willing to do things differently than it has been done before.
Okay.
In addition to holding each other accountable, if there were to be something that popped up, for example, like what happened with this last coalition with the ombudsman's report against the Minister of Rami.
Yes.
Um, that was a critical sticking point for us because, I think a lot of people think that, because someone is highest vote getter or whatever, that you can just let them skate by doing whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how accountability works. It works whether it's you in coalition or you in opposition. Persons, have tried to paint it as, yeah, but I was in opposition. It's going to be different when you're in there. Not really. And we've made that abundantly clear to our coalition partners that if things start to go left and there is no internal attempt to hold that person accountable, then we'll just have to take it the route that it usually has been taken and take it to parliament.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was important for us. It was important that we were able to say that and receive the same type of energy back. When we've had these conversations with others in the political arena, the energy has not matched. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how we ended up with where we are right now.
All right. So we have a coalition of eight,
Hmm.
eight members of parliament. And of course, we've heard all the different, nicknames you've gotten: two by four, government, four by two.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of names people have given this new coalition of the 2468. I called it 2468.
I like that. Only you appreciate.
Yes. No, and of course, we saw then in the parliamentary election that the community does want a shift.
Yes.
They're looking for a shift.
Yes.
We saw a lot of new emerging parties getting two seats right off of the bat. You're maintaining your two seats. Democratic Party gained another seat. So definitely there was a shift in the way of how people were, voicing their opinions.
Yes.
So now, together with the different parties, now that you've made a coalition, what's the next step? So we're just breaking it down for the persons that are not familiar with the political
Yes.
procedures of forming a government.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give us a little
So,
illustration.
as many people would be aware, His Excellency Governor Bali has basically put in place two informators,
Yes.
even though there is a majority willing to work together. And I think a lot of people panicked when they saw that because they said, oh my God, is the coalition in danger? No, I think that the governor has taken this step to ensure that everybody gets to have their voice heard. The
Correct.
purpose of an informateur is to go over the wishes, the desires, the pain points discuss approach the policy and
Mm-hmm.
approach the governance, really, so that there's no surprise further down the line. You may believe in capital punishment and I don't, and if we don't have that conversation beforehand,
Right.
it'll pop up and I'll be like, Electra, what? Like,
It's like going
yeah,
into
like
a
surprise,
marriage,
surprise, yeah.
putting
So
your cards on the table. You
exactly.
have to
So
have those difficult
and in
conversations.
addition to that, the informateurs can also have discussions with private sector, with other stakeholders in the community.
Understood.
And that's also important because I think any government should form their governing accord with the wishes of the community taken into account.
Very good.
So I'm not opposed to this process. It may mean that it takes maybe a week or two longer to
Mm-hmm.
start the screening process then, and when you have an actual formateur who's then going to form the government. But the four parties are we're very much aligned. We're talking every day, and I think that that's important as well, for us coming through this informateur process.
Well, forming government, of course, we know that it's no easy thing. Like you said, it's like putting all the cards on the table,
Yeah.
talking about all the pros and the cons and the issues that you can, find along the way, and see what kind of agreements you all can have so that, it ensures stability and
Yeah.
sustainability. That is something that we have experienced in the last 4 years, sustainable government. I mean, in the last 13 years for the first time. So it does show that the island hopefully is growing up a
Hmm.
little. I mean, we're only 13 years old,
Yeah.
and you go through adolescent period when you're
Yeah.
13. But what is interesting, I find too, once creating the government, the second procedure is then the getting the credentials for the parliamentarians as they come in, right?
Yeah.
So explain that process
So
too.
next week, we will review the credential. I think it's next week. We'll review the credentials of the incoming members of parliament. It's going to be a very new parliament. There's not that many returning members returning.
Okay,
So that's going to be interesting. But it's mainly sort of just a check that their documentation is in place regards to the central voting bureau.
correct.
They've accepted. You have to accept your seat or decline your seat. If that's what you feel you want to do. And then making sure that all of that is correct, and then the process can move forward.
Now, something very interesting.
Yeah.
Over the years, we also, my colleagues, we talk about it. You hear about electoral reform. Then
Hmm.
there is like, okay, the National Alliance got 4 seats, the DP got 2 seats, Party for Progress got two, USM got two. Did I forget one?
The now got to.
The
Yeah.
Up got three.
Yeah.
So you hear that um, talk. The parties have gotten the seats.
Hmm.
But then I ask myself, how does that work?
Yeah.
How can a party get a seat? Okay. Then the letter is given to the individual,
Hmm.
but then you create a faction,
Yeah.
but then you can go independent.
Yeah.
So if the party gets the seat, the
Yeah.
Zetos, and that person wants to go independent, how does that work? Because I think there's some kind of a gap there.
So
Something
I
doesn't
think I
add
think
up.
MP Peterson could probably explain this a lot better, with his background in constitutional law. But
Okay.
essentially, the party is just a vehicle.
Yes.
It's just a bus to help you get into parliament. When you're in there, the intention is that the party concept kind of has to die a little bit. Persons are then allowed to vote their conscience and move with their conscience. In some countries that are also a parliamentary democracy, you have different laws, etc. I think one of the more recent ones that I could think of is, I think in New Zealand, up
Mm-hmm.
until 2018, because the law expired in 2018, it was, if you went independent, you had to leave parliament entirely. It's changed now. So now I think
Okay.
for the first time I think they have two independent members of parliament, but with rules attached to that,
Okay.
which is something that we've been discussing in Parliament as well. Because right now, independent members become a faction unto themselves.
That's what I was gonna
But
ask.
it is very possible to regulate that from the Parliament side, which is something that I have mentioned we need to discuss,
Mm-hmm.
so that there is no extra cost to the country if someone does go independent. And the reason why you do that is because, some people go independent for very valid reasons, and some go independent because they're throwing a tantrum. I think that in that regard, when you're throwing a tantrum, probably should not have rights to two faction staff. You should not be considered a faction that then travels to IPCO, which is why we've had 10 faction leaders traveling to IPCO over these last 2 years. But that is something that we have to fix for ourselves. And like I said, before we entered the campaign period,
Yes.
I think MP Heiliger Martin tabled it for a faction leaders meeting where we would discuss regulating independent members of parliament. So it's something that's going to continue. And all of that, of course, counts as electoral reform because you're meant to discourage the jumping of a ship basically. But there are instances where if someone leaves their party, it has been very valid. And I think this term we've seen two very valid departures, which was MP De Weaver, of course, and MP Duncan. I think they very clearly stipulated why they were leaving where they were. They had their experiences well documented, well stated, and they decided, no, I can't do it anymore. Like the expectation to move along with party lines just because, even when in your gut you felt like it was not correct. I think
Hmm.
that they both kind of struggled with that, and that is a valid reason to go independent.
When we talk about um, this electoral reform, as you mentioned it, you've been discussing it before. What about then, as you stated, the elections are more so like the parties, I'm sorry, were more like a vehicle, a
Hmm.
bus to get where you're going. So why not eliminate that altogether? Because I'm thinking at the end of the day, it's only the most 15 people that have the most votes
Hmm.
are going to be the group of people
Yeah,
that are going to represent the entire country.
and that's part of the
So
discussion. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm thinking to myself, why go through all of that when at the end of the day you all going to be giving that letter individually,
Hmm.
and then you group up together to make a faction. But it's just like, yeah, we're working together for the greater good of the community, and and that's why I'm thinking, why not look at it in a different angle?
Yeah.
But yeah,
It and that all of that can form part of the discussion. And I
yeah,
think I think really where the base issue lies is that when it comes to electoral reform, you can change the constitution, you can change whatever,
right.
but if the people, if the vote getters are not persons that are approaching this as what it is, which is public service, you're
Hmm.
always going to run into the same issue. And that's why our focus has been on fixing, first of all, the electoral process. You don't have to change the constitution to have electoral reform. It really starts with who is on these parties, who's in the bus, and are they the right people to be on the bus. A lot of jokes have been made at our expense about the fact that we had 10 candidates, which was an increase of two from the last time, etc. But I think because we focus on doing our best to screen candidates as best as we can to make sure that the persons that are ending up in here understand that it is public service. It is something that you have to approach with humility and with a
Hmm.
focus on community. You have others that are in here, and it's more like a popularity contest. Who has the flashiest jingle, who has the flashiest, gear, swag, etc.
No, but I think that's more
That's part of our political culture.
marketing. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's
it's
more marketing, and
marketing and
marketing is fine.
campaigning and.
As someone who studied it, I'm not against marketing, but marketing also does really well at hiding someone's character.
Hmm.
And that is really what the problem is. And you can't legislate character. You could change any law you want. If someone wants to leave for nefarious reasons, if someone is not in there with integrity and a commitment to accountability in the community, then it doesn't matter if there was a vehicle, if they were on their own. It really starts with first doing your best to put persons there who are actually in it for the right reasons.
And then I think that would just bring us to the point of the code of conduct
Hmm.
that was brought about not some time ago, and that discussion also began. Maybe you can talk about
Yeah,
that too.
so I in 2014, I believe there was there was a draft code of conduct.
Yeah.
When I was first elected, I was chairwoman of the ad hoc committee for integrity in Parliament, and that was one of my main tasks is to try to bring this code of conduct to fruition. So we went ahead, we in to get in collaboration with Youth Parliament actually. We redrafted it, we updated it,
Mm-hmm.
presented it. Everybody said, "Oh, this is very it's we need something that's more culturally like us. That look at the examples in the region, etc." Okay, so I did that, and I tried to pick the most palatable pieces of the codes of conduct for from Trinidad, St. Kitts, etc., which actually those things are enshrined in law. It's not just a code in parliament, and so it is literally an act that governs how public officials should conduct themselves,
Got it.
should behave, how they should
Mm-hmm.
earn money, what they should declare. Um, and then I tried to, we put in a mechanism because youth parliament was very strict. I gotta say, if politicians would listen to the young people, many of them would be afraid to run because at one point they said, okay, so if they violate this code, what happens? I said, well, we can build in a mechanism where they either get a fine or
Mm-hmm.
so. In some countries, you pay a fine if
Right.
you violate the code. And then they said one of the students said, why can't they go to jail? I said, whoa. I said, baby steps. But yeah, and most were very still unpleased with that. And I said, well, then are we really ready to hold ourselves to a higher standard?
Well, I think it's interesting that you should bring that about because, some, we say the children are our
Yeah.
future. And I think that society forgets that they look to the adults. What are they doing? How are they behaving? And little kids or small people, as you would call them, they have a mind, they have intuition, they can see when something is wrong or right and may think like, but wait a minute, that was not correct. How come he gets to get away with it? But
Yes.
if I do something like that, I get punished.
Yes.
So there's a big like
Yeah.
disparity between being the role models we want to create for our kids and actually walking the walk.
Yes. And that was exactly my, I guess, the drive behind why I wanted to engage with Youth Parliament on this and why they played a heavy hand in redrafting this code of conduct. Like
Mm-hmm.
most that was their ideas that's in there. So for me, I felt, all right, well, if we're not willing to listen to Youth Parliament, then really what is the goal?
Mm-hmm.
And simple things, a gift policy was, yeah, well, what is a gift? I'm like, guys, please. The fact of declaring what you're doing, because as members of parliament, even though this salary was set for it to be a full-time job, many have ancillary activities, shares in a company, businesses that they either own or part own, etc., and there's just no willingness to declare it. Ministers have to declare that stuff, but we, have not taken that step as yet for ourselves.
Yeah, but then, like you said, we, meaning the parliament,
Yes.
have not taken that step to do that because as a parliamentarian, then you are like co-legislators making the highest legislative policies for the country. You would think that that would be like a real time job,
You
like
would think, but
you would
then
think.
we're
That's what
back
I
to we're,
say.
we're back to you can't legislate character, and it's the character of the persons in the bus that matters the most.
Well, of course, now let's talk about future.
Hmm.
We've got the new coalition partners, 8 members in parliament. It's still very, you know, tight.
I think that's a matter of perspective because people say, well, it's such a slim majority. Yes, but remember, we've also had a majority of 10 supporting the government, and that government was also toppled after a
That's true.
year. So
That's true.
and that's again back to you can't legislate character. If people want to do bad, they're gonna do bad.
Hmm.
You just have to make sure that you are willing to hold them accountable when they do that.
Well, when I think about parliament as a citizen looking in, that's just my personal view of it. I just look at 15 people.
Yeah.
It's like we're playing a game and you have the opposition and you have the ones that are governing the majority. And for me, the bottom line is when you take that oath, all 15 people should have that as priority number one.
Yes.
That you are standing up for the community of St. Martin.
Yes.
And if you see one party doing something, hey, wait a minute, that's why opposition is there to pull on the string and say, hey, wait a minute, wait a
Yeah.
minute. So there is a balance. It's just like a marriage,
Yeah.
as it were.
As it were. Yeah.
It's a marriage, but people say, oh, a marriage is 50-50. I don't believe in
Hmm.
that. I believe that as Parliament, it should be 100%, 100%.
100%. Yeah.
You
No, you're
know.
absolutely right. And I think, the thing, opposition is not um the only set of people expected to keep the government accountable. It
Mm-hmm.
is expected of all of us, all 15 of us. In um, when you look at other similar systems around the world and even in the region, it is expected that whether you're in government or out, you are keeping an eye and a finger on the pulse of what is being done to make sure it is being done in the best interest of the country. I think too often we look at opposition as, and we've been brushed off as, well, you're opposition, so you have no choice but to fight and argue. Absolutely not. Because I would hope that if someone is doing something incorrect that's costing the country money or so, or just unethical, because that's also a thing that I think we struggle with.
Work ethic,
Yes, not just work
professionalism.
ethic, but ethics in general. Like,
Okay.
spending public money to for your own personal campaign. One could argue that that is what you have seen happen. And I think that ethics versus legality. Everyone here just uses, well, is it illegal as the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the deeper question that should be asked is it right? Is it morally ambiguous or is it correct? And that is where you get into, is it ethically, from a professional level, the right thing to do or the right way to move, which is sometimes even more important than, is it illegal? Because something could be legal doesn't mean it's ethical.
Yes,
You know
I know.
and
It's like it's
it's
like a
a
paradox. It's like,
balancing act.
yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think, if anyone who has worked in private sector, has that mentality already. They are aware that sometimes the ethics and the optics of a thing is more important than, is it legal, is it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I think we need to start looking at.
But I think there will be, as you progress, I think what could happen is once Parliament decides on, the different criteria like you were talking about earlier with the youth Parliament and getting the feedback of how you want to do a code of conduct
Hmm.
or put in fines or, these are the principles and criteria
Yeah.
on how these things should go. And I know they're somewhat formalized in the electoral process, but I think then maybe things would be a little different.
Yeah.
Then they wouldn't have so much that discrepancy about should we do it? Is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it professional? Is it
Yes.
unprofessional?
Yes.
Those types of questions. Now let's talk about you hear over the years, you always hear people talk about that's my minister.
Yeah.
I would like for you as a parliamentarian to clear that saying as best as you could. What do they mean by that? That's my minister.
Yeah.
So does that mean like what I say because I'm a faction and I've selected you, you have to do exactly what I say? You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? That's my minister.
I believe
Explain that.
that's the mentality that many have. And I think that's just how our political culture has evolved.
Okay.
It's still very much stuck in a very island council-y, mentality, like a Netherlands Antilles mentality,
Okay.
where like this person is, that's mine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not supposed to work like that. What you have when you have that kind of attitude is ministries that operate as silos and do not realize that what it's supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. What impacts one will impact the other, and vice versa.
Correct.
And that is the approach that we're taking to this. We've said already. The style of moving needs to stop. And we're trying to see how we can better blend the cooperation between ministries that generally have not really cooperated very well. And I think it's something that is said because persons believe that it is so, but that's not how it's supposed to work. When you think about separation of the powers, it's just, well, I've appointed you, and you're going to just have to do the job. And when you get into the, this is my minister, then you also become very protectionist of said person, and it makes accountability tough.
Okay.
Because nobody wants to take anybody off the vingers, if they're doing something. But that's how you have to approach it. Again, I say, it's maybe a very private sector approach to things, but I think that we need to start looking at government as the business of the people and manage it like a business. And a part of that is relinquishing that this is, your minister, and it's just a minister that you have appointed that is now having to work for the good of the country.
Well, there's so many, so many things that we can discuss, and of course, people are very eager and interested to know what this new coalition is going to bring.
Yeah.
And change is always good, or some people feel like change is like, but we evolve as human beings each and every day. We learn a new word, we meet a new person.
Yeah.
There are little miniature changes that go on in our daily lives. Sometimes they are huge changes, but I think we have to adapt,
Yeah.
just going through the adolescent period and becoming more professional as we elevate to a higher height.
Yeah.
Now, as ministers are chosen, let's talk about the screening process, because you always hear this: oh, they need to be screened. They need to be
Yeah.
screened. Is there a criteria based on what, why, how they're being screened?
Well, right now, I believe we're still using an old Landsbesleit, a national decree that kind of uh, dictates how screening should go, and it's checks about your taxes, if there are any open investigations against you,
Okay.
so those are the most critical components of it. When we first were elected, there was a discussion from the government about a screening law. So actually enshrining it into a national ordinance, and Curacao has one,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very very strict. Even like for me as someone who believes in good corporate governance and the proper people being in, like it's very strict. And I think that right now what we need to maybe look at is adapting it, not to make it less stringent,
Stringent.
but there are certain things culturally that exist here that don't exist elsewhere. Um and I think that we need to keep that in mind with whatever we put in place in terms of like a screening. So that's something that is also going to be up for discussion. But right now, it's mostly what's your tax situation like? Are there any open investigations against you, and so forth? And then at the end of the day, the formateur makes that decision on if they're going to move forward or not.
So as we move forward, we hear often in presidential elections, the next 100 days or the first 100 days. What are, if you can, or maybe divulge some of the things that perhaps the coalition had thought about
Yeah.
that they would like to present for the first 100 days?
No, these are still things in discussion. I think we all have, and again, it's about aligning and seeing where best it matches. There are
Mhm.
things, of course, that we all share that are a focus for us. And from our end as PFP, we've been stressing about, for example, better regulation of government spending, especially when it comes to tendering. So that is something that we have already brought up and said, we need to get this under control, because only then can things start to move forward in a more professional and transparent manner. So that's what we'll be championing in these discussions. And so far, the feedback has been positive. But for the rest, yeah, that's still in discussion. So I can't.
And another aspect I was thinking about: when we're ministers, we have weekly press briefings. Okay, so and history has shown, we've seen ministers that don't show up for the briefings, so then it gives you the feeling like, is there nothing to talk about in your
Yeah.
ministry that is taking place? Is there a specific or a mandatory procedure where it says that every Wednesday you have to be there, or you just come whenever you feel like?
I mean, I'm not sure. For me,
Hmm.
if I were to be a minister, then I would make it my business to be at press briefing, at least to communicate, because that's one of your main opportunities to communicate with the wider population. So I think it was very disheartening for me to see, especially over the last year, and you had maybe like one or two ministers show up for press briefing. If more show up, they just give updates and then they, bug out before questions can start rolling in. And I think that first of all, it's a disrespect to the media, and it's a disrespect to the people, because it's, like I said, one of your few opportunities to communicate with the masses. Whatever you may feel personally about the media houses in the room. So I think if you're not off island, then or in a medical emergency, I'm not too sure why you wouldn't show up. I mean, it's every Wednesday. It doesn't change. Every Wednesday at the same time. If there's an emergency comm meeting, sure, we can understand why you miss it. But too often persons in the community, you'd see them waiting, and then the comments under the live stream of Fresh Briefing are telling already. Well, why only one minister there? Why not the rest? Blah blah blah. And I think that you should be, like you say, you should remain in touch with the community to realize their frustration with that, because it's a disrespect.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I know that parliamentary meetings happen on a regular, and you can live stream it and look at it and stuff like that. But just something that I'm thinking about, working in the media myself, um, would that be something to have a parliamentary press briefing?
It's
Would that be something?
you're like the fifth person to suggest something like that. And I mean, it's something that can be discussed.
Hmm.
That it's maybe
Because
the presidium that gives a sort of update.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we just had a parliamentary election that people voted for your voice.
Yeah.
So they also, I think, want to hear what's going on with the 15 people that have been selected
Yeah.
to the community.
Yeah.
They
and
want to
and
know
and
what
and,
you guys are
and
doing.
many people don't watch the meetings, so I think
Exactly.
it would be a nice little, a shorter way to kind of communicate what's happening. And
No, but not only that, I think it would be a nice way to say, well, currently, whether it's your faction or me as MP Melissa Gumbs, I've been working on this. It doesn't have to be every,
yeah.
weekly or whatever, or maybe by twice a month or whatever. I've done this. That people know, like, hey, that's my representative.
Right.
I voted for her. This is what she's doing with the taxpayers' money. So then people have that kind of connection, and I always say that, that sometimes our politicians forget how they got there,
Right. No,
and
you're
that
right.
behavior
It's a
is
good suggestion.
reflected.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, and definitely something that I'll raise in the discussions. Because, like I said, people have said, "Well, why doesn't Parliament do a press briefing?"
Yes.
It's something to consider.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, we can talk so many things. There's so many topics that I would love to talk and discuss with you about. Of course, to give people that insight, and I just want to wish you and the new coalition government a powerful, positive, electric, dynamic, all the positive adjectives that I can think about, and not only to the 8 members, but to all 15 of
Yeah.
you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
To all 15 parliamentarians who are gonna represent the country of Saint Martin, because at the end of the day, you're our voices, whether in opposition or in government.
Yeah.
You are our representative.
No, you're absolutely right, and thank you, for the well wishes. And it is also my hope that all 15 of us move forward now with a focus on integrity and a focus on accountability and responsibility. That's been my biggest wish. I hope that any incoming opposition operates like how we did as opposition, which is asking questions, pressing for information, trying to communicate with the government, and even too when we saw that something was right, we said okay, yes, and we voted for it. I think as opposition people, someone asked me once, they were like, how come I voted yes on the budget? I'm like, because it's the country's budget. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to vote against it just for voting against its sake. If something makes sense and I can find myself in it, you have to support it. But this, we didn't try to play that immature game of, well, because I'm opposition, I'm going to just shoot it down. No, you have to be able to weigh those decisions for yourself, and make what you consider is right for your conscience and right for the country. And sometimes that means voting yes with coalition, and sometimes it means maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Understood. Understood. And of course, the burning question that everybody wants to know about. There are certain people, like everybody have their freedom of speech, and there's certain people in the community, and there have been videos, there have been, of course, songs, there have been all kinds of things going around on the internet that are bringing concerns to the community of Saint Martin. If you could you shed your light on behalf of, or just from your personal opinion, what are the strategies on that, or what your thoughts about that?
Yeah.
How?
I think I would urge the people to critically think first about the messenger. It's very obvious that we're seeing a sort of a meltdown, emotionally speaking, and I think people should ask themselves, well, why? And I also would like to urge persons to really think back to when this all started happening and who was around this individual when it did start happening. And I myself will be, I've been kind of writing my thoughts out on it,
Hmm.
because of course I was like one of the primary targets in the last few months leading up to elections, of this, freedom of speech, but not freedom from consequence individual. And I think it's also important to recognize that. And if you see that something does not seem right, maybe don't share it, because these types of behaviors only live life if you feed into it. I myself do not. I don't share it. People share it to me. I just okay, delete. I get the Cliff Notes versions from the persons who do watch it, but it's not something that I think that people should waste their energy on or let into their space. We have a job to do. We're here now to work, and I think that the party leader of the now has made it clear that this person has no say in how things are going, and we ourselves are now going to be communicating more. I think every step of the way to say, no, guys, this is actually what's happening, and this is actually reality.
I think the community would definitely love that going forward, because it brings that kind of, we don't know,
Yeah,
we don't
I
know.
understand.
Everybody has
Yeah,
their opinions. Everybody can say whatever they want to
yeah,
say, but as leaders for our country, we also have to, you know, uh, help to the community for them to feel safe and secure, feel
yes.
included, feel like, hey, I can follow these new people, and some type of good leadership.
Yeah, and I think this is also what you see. It's also a sort of drawback of citizen journalism, as they call it, which is something that social media has given considerable rise to. We've seen it here as well. You have news outlets that are not necessarily news or could not be considered news outlets in any other country but St. Martin. And I think that it's important as well to highlight that. I can literally type a message to you now, say some outrageous stuff on WhatsApp. You forward it to 10 people, they forward it to 50 people. It doesn't make it true. It does not make it true at all. And I think that's the disconnect we have between what actually is journalism and what actually is news reporting, and what is not. And if you can't fact check it, then it's not real. I can type anything right now, send it out, and persons will not know where it came from. As soon as I see forwarded many times on WhatsApp, I usually tend to ignore. I'm like, okay, because yesterday I think I got a forwarded message where apparently I was going independent from my own party, because of some voice notes, which I found amusing. But there are persons who don't,
Because
have that
people are not
insight.
sure, they're
Exactly.
not sure,
Exactly.
so then you create that kind of
Mystery,
insecurity
yeah,
and
and
mystery,
insecurity.
and because, yeah, they're not sure.
And I think that's also on purpose, because as soon as you have a barrage of videos of voice notes, you kind of then get a statement from certain members of the current coalition where it's deep, deep concern over the stability of the 2x4. And I think persons also have to think about, is it by design that all of this is happening?
Well, Melissa, Party for Progress MP Melissa Gumbs, thank you for joining me
Thank you
this
for having me.
morning. And I wish you and the new government, all 15 of you, a lot of success, and, of course, a fortitude to, push forward and lead with intention and
Yes,
purpose for
most
the
definitely.
community of St. Martin.
Thank you.